Hi there, welcome to another episode of 411 Pop Culture, where real people talk about really everything. I'm Justin.
I'm Danielle.
And tonight, we are going to do another VC Andrews theory video on Did Arden Love Audrina? Which was requested by Andre Lewis, so thank you for the request. But we apologize, we haven't been able to do an episode in a long time. We've been super busy. I started a new job. You've been on trips and work trips, vacation trips. So we know you missed these episodes. We know that this is what you want to see, most of you. So we're trying to film one today, and hopefully we can film at least one more this weekend, if not two more. We've just been so busy. So forgive us. But we really wanted to get one out to you, so we're going to do this one. And we told Andre Lewis that we were going to get this one out, so here it is. But this is a complicated one, and to be fair, I thought we were going to film this one months ago, so I reread my Sweet Audrina like 3 months ago. And we've been trying to prep for it as best we can, but time keeps passing by. So you'll have to forgive us if there's any continuity errors or anything like that. But I think that this is a pretty interesting one. It's kind of a complex one because it is a situation on, I think it's dependent upon event after event. I'm a big proponent of, you can't argue, oh, if this had not happened, he would love her. Or if this had happened, she would do this, because the whole point of the stories are they happened the way that they happened. But in this situation, I think that's kind of a big factor of why they are together. And in order to discuss this, I think you have to kind of speculate on, if what had happened to Audrina had not happened, how things would be differently. Let's jump right in.
Yeah.
What are your initial thoughts, Danielle, on, do you think that Arden loved Audrina?
He loved her out of guilt and wanting to protect her. I don't think he would have ended up with her, to be honest, if what happened to her hadn't happened to her. I don't think that they would have been together. I think he was somebody who wanted to keep an eye on her out of guilt, and she trusted him, and because she didn't really know what happened to her, she got, had this puppy love for this guy, but I don't really think that was her dream guy either, to be honest. I just think it was circumstantial.
I agree. I also think, I'd like to have a more declarative statement on whether or not, yes, I do believe, or no, I don't believe. I think, again, I'm going to be falling somewhere in a murky middle gray area. I think that there are things that suggest that he did love her. You want to go, I think Elspeth is the one that says what they had was puppy love, and puppy love doesn't usually last to maturity, which Audrina, digs her heels in and wants it even more to work out. But I think if you look at the story, I think it's sweet. He is giving Audrina these Valentine's Day candy that, Vera obviously hoards for herself and doesn't give to her. But he also says things like the quartz. I know he had this pink quartz stone that he said he was going to give to the girl that he loved. So the fact that he gives it to Audrina, if you want to look at this from an academic standpoint, that symbolically means that he loved Audrina. He even says later on that he loves, to Vera when she's wanting Audrina to be taken off of the life support. He's like, I love my wife, I'll always love her, but I love you too. Yes, there are things to suggest that, yes, Arden does love Audrina, but it doesn't mean it's actual real love, or that he's just maybe a victim of circumstance. So things I want to kind of look at. And also, we want to talk about the movie a little bit too, because I think it's not one of the strongest of the adaptations, but I know I've really come around to loving it. Do you?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I really enjoyed the adaptation. I know
Yeah.
we did a video on it, and
Yeah.
I know I had some issues with the house, but in general, I really did enjoy the adaptation.
For sure. Now, I guess we'll start kind of chronologically. So, before the event of the novel of what happened to Audrina happened, which for YouTube reasons, I'm not going to just come out and say it. You all know what happened. But before the event, you had Audrina and Arden knew each other, and Vera was hovering around in the background. Do I think that at that age they were in love? No. I think it's like the sort of setup that, when you're young, yes, you kind of love, you have little crushes on people or whatever when you're in that 8, 9 range, but it's puppy love, like Elspeth said. I think though, if the event had not happened, do I think it would have continued? I think it's very unlikely. What do you think about that? If the event had not happened and based on just the relationship they had beforehand.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Because a lot of, I think, what drew Arden to Audrina was that guilt of this terrible thing that happened to her. And when we're younger, I'm going to make an assumption here, we tend to be like, oh, we can fix this person, or this person's broken, and we reach out to them and we want to be around them and show them love and all these things that Arden did, right? But when you get older, like my age now, you're kind of like, I'm not fixing this. This isn't my problem, kind of thing. So I don't really think he would have even got to know her due to the age differences and things like that. She's 4 years younger. 9 and 13, that's a pretty big jump when you're that age. So I think a lot of that was maybe started as brotherly or protective love that developed into this thing. But like you said, I don't think that it was true love or would have even happened if that hadn't happened.
I agree completely, particularly with the thing you said about the age discrepancy. I won't give out any names here, but when I was growing up, my best friend, my next door neighbor, her and I were about 3 years apart in age. I met her when she was 4, I was 6 or 7, so when we were next door neighbors. So we hung out all the time. We watched movies together, read books together, played games together, and that's fine when you're that age because you're 7 or 8. It's not like you're going to drive and meet friends or, you don't even have to really rely on your parents to drive you anywhere. So and interesting enough, we had a little wooded area that you had to kind of like walk through to get there, similar to Audrina and Arden. But it's true, and I don't feel bad about it. Like I don't dwell on it, but a part of me always felt bad because at a certain age, I think I was probably around like 9, 10, 11. I obviously started to drift away. I was hanging out with the boys my age, with friends my age. There's just something that happens where you're like, I don't have anything in common anymore with the 7-year-old when I'm 10 or 11. And I think that's what you were kind of saying, that like, if what had happened had not happened to Audrina, I think that, yeah, they probably naturally would have gone apart. In fact, Arden was even at that point, the day that what happened to Audrina in the woods happened, it's because he was trying to impress older boys. He was staying there to try and like finally get to hang out, because I'm guessing up until that point, his whole thing was hanging out with Audrina and sometimes Vera. He wanted to now start hanging out with kids his own age. It's just something that happens. So I also think that it's very, very unlikely. And I remember too, at that age when I was probably about 8, like my aunts or my brother's friends always being, you and that girl you're going to grow up and get married and da da da. Even at that age, I was sort of like, no, I don't, what? Um, and probably in some ways that makes you like even less want to hang out with that person. And I'm sure that was a contributing factor. Like you grow up, you grow differently.
Yeah.
But
well, even when I was, when I was younger, 6, 7, 8, I hung out with boys. Those were my friends. And then right after like 8, like around 8 and 9, it was all girls. I hung out with the girls.
So even if it's not an age discrepancy, you do tend to kind of then start to hang out.
Because like you said, I didn't really have anything in common with the boys when I was 8 and 9, like you do when you're a little bit younger.
Yeah.
And everything's just play. Then you start having different interests and.
It's true. Yeah. It's true. I agree. All right, so that's if things had not happened, then no, I also don't think that they would have still ended up together. And I don't think that Arden, he may have always been fond of her, but I don't think he would have fallen in love.
Sister kind of thing.
Exactly.
I feel like they would have had kind of that relationship.
And in fact, I think things would have happened with Vera, but let's say now, well, what happened happened. I still think Vera plays a big part in why I think that Arden didn't really. I'll land in the murky area. I know where you're going to go, that it's guilt and all that, and I agree too. But I also think that there's still some love there. But is he in love with Audrina? That's where I'm struggling to be like, I don't think that he was. But let's take that what you were just about to say, because you start hanging out with people, a little bit older, etc. Arden did, even at that age, even after what happened to Audrina, he did stuff with Vera. I'm pretty sure that it mentions Vera always mentions doing stuff in the cloakroom with the boys. I'm pretty sure Arden was one of those boys. And by the end of the novel, right, and by the end of the novel, you find out that not only did that happen, but I'm pretty sure the pregnancy that Vera had that got her to go with Lamar, I'm pretty sure was from Arden, which would mean this happened after the fact. So if he was devoting himself, Arden, to Audrina at this time out of guilt, obligation, whatever you want to call it, it still shows that there's like a lack of true love, because he was still fooling around with Vera, which
I always had a problem with.
Yeah, which leads to a lot of big problems. Yeah.
I'm like, if he loved Audrina as much as he said,
Mm-hmm.
this stuff with Vera would never have
Yeah.
happened. It's been something that's bothered me about the novel since like I was young and I read it. And now we're finally getting to talk about it. So that's really exciting.
Well, reading it, I think it's the real sense of probably real betrayal that I ever felt. You
Yes.
know, 'cause I think it was probably about 12 or 13 when I read My Sweet Audrina for the first time. And you get so invested, especially in the actual Virginia written novels, in these characters that I really felt betrayed by Vera time and time
Yes.
again, especially the ultimate betrayal, but also primarily with Arden. And, even like we said, Elspeth was like, it's just puppy love. And I know that Lucietta felt really bad for Arden. Like, I think she forgave Arden for his part and everything because she even says to Audrina at some point, Audrina comes to her mother and is like, Arden has this secret he wants to tell me one day, but I told him he probably shouldn't, and he's so afraid of being thought of as a coward. And Lucky says, sometimes it's better to just run away and survive another day, which is very much alluding to Arden. And I always thought that was really sweet of Lucietta, but also like knowing how young they were and that maybe it's not really love, or maybe Lucky was one of like I said, my aunt or older friends, my brother's older friends would be like, oh, you two are gonna get together. Maybe Lucky was one of those people that would be like, maybe they will end up together, these two youngsters. But really, I don't think that that's, what necessarily would have happened.
I think too, just looking at the story holistically, like that event in and of itself ruined all their lives. I
Absolutely.
mean, it really changed the trajectory of what I think any of those people would have done.
Hmm.
I mean, Vera was so nasty. I don't think she would have even, I mean, she's a little wild rebel, but I don't think she would have been as like seemingly heartless about certain things because she was so jealous of all the attention Audrina would get.
Hmm.
Same thing with Arden. I don't think anything would have come of that other than a little sisterly love. Like,
Right.
he would have been hanging out with Vera and her friends. So I guess that's just my thought. It's just a traumatic incident, and I really just think that.
And I think you're right that like Vera was obviously jealous. I don't think that she had any real interest in Arden whatsoever from beginning to end. I think it was always about, even probably before the event happened, it was more of a like, this is Audrina's boy, so I've got to have him, even if it wasn't like true love. But I think ultimately Arden's character trait is that the whole in his early days and everything, he's always saying, "Oh, I was a coward one day," and I think that sticks with him the rest of his life. And I think most guys, and we've discussed this like in real life, that I think a lot of guys don't want to come across as the bad guy. Nobody wants to be the bad guy. Nobody wants to be the villain. So I think a lot of times, though, there's a lot of guys that fall into this trap where they end up being the villain and the bad guy in an attempt to not be. Meaning they'll initially tell a girl, like, oh, here are my flaws, here is this. So then later on, the girl can't be like, oh, you should have told me this about you. Instead, he could be like, well, you always knew this about me. Or they'll do things to get the girl to be the one to end it, so then they still don't have to be the bad guy who broke up with the girl, like Arden. And Arden does both of these things. Like in that situation, he's always like, "Oh, guys have needs. Guys have needs." So if Audrina were to leave him, he can then be like, oh, well, I told you, or she will break up with him, therefore he's not the bad guy. Or she can't hold it against him later on and be like, you should have told me this. He's like, but I always told you I was a coward. So no matter what, he's trying not to be the bad guy. And in doing so, he ends up living his life based on guilt and this so that neither one of them can actually achieve love with each other. And I think that like it's possible, like if you look at like Kathy and Chris, they're put into this situation together where they found love with each other because they were so isolated. Well, Arden and Audrina also kind of end up being isolated, one by her circumstance, but Arden isolates himself with her out of duty and guilt. But I think like there are two things. Like you could be two things. Like I think it shows love that he does make sure she's always walked to the end of the yard or gets back safely. I think it shows love that when Audrina says, "Hey, the only way you could be with me is if you're also with, you have to accept Sylvia," he ultimately does too. So I think that does show love, but intermixed with guilt and obligation. But what do you think about that? Is it possible to be both, or do you think that it's only he does those things out of guilt?
I think he's only doing those things out of guilt, especially the Sylvia thing, because if he was truly in love with Audrina and they were supposed to be together, Sylvia wouldn't have even been an argument. It wouldn't have even been a conversation. Like, to me, like, if I
I see what
really
you're
love
saying.
somebody, like, yep, yep, it's mine too. Like, whatever pain you're feeling is mine. Whatever joy you're feeling is mine. Whoever you love, I love. So for them to even have that kind of conversation about, well, you need to accept her, and he would have already. She wouldn't have even had to have that conversation, I don't think. So in my
That's a
mind,
good
it's
point.
still driven by guilt. And now that, when they get together when they're older and things like that, it perpetuates that guilt. Now we can't even get out of it. And this is all she knows.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think she was happy with him either. I mean, he cheated on her and all this. I mean, it's just bad. They shouldn't have even been together. I'm so glad we're talking about
Yeah,
this.
yeah, no, because I think it's interesting. It
Yeah.
brings up the topic of love in general. But I do think that they would have been friends. I do think that, like, being just in that close proximity, but ultimately, I think you're right. I think that you do just accept the other person. I think at that age, though, I do think age has to be taken in with it. And between the ages of like 18 and 21, we're still all pretty selfish, and we're only thinking like how this is going to affect us, which is why I think like you should wait a little bit to really,
Maybe for you.
debate.
I'm impulsive, so I
Sure,
don't
but
think
I
through
think
those things when I was 20.
well, sure,
Yeah.
and it's true, but I think you do now. You
Oh,
just
yeah.
demonstrated that, and so that's what I'm saying. At that age too, I was being impulsive too, and I think that like you don't necessarily think about like, or all of a sudden you're like, wait, I just expected love to mean we get married and it's this. I didn't know that there
Mm-hmm.
might be like actual complications, and that's the real world. There are complications,
Yeah.
and so. I think that like, it makes sense that he's hesitant, but I do think you're making a good point that like when you really truly love somebody, it doesn't matter what baggage they come with. And I think that like he would have just been like, yeah, because I think he is sort of like, well, wait a minute, with my duty and obligation, I was expecting things to be maybe a little difficult with you physically, but I wasn't expecting to also have to take on Sylvia. Yeah, I think you make a good point there.
Yeah, and for him, it's like that's a lot of baggage for both of them to deal with.
Yeah,
I mean, so I think that they were brought together because of the circumstance, because of the event, brought them closer, and they both were drawn to each other because of X reasons, right? Audrina didn't trust anybody. She was very naive and exploring like new love and getting older. Arden's out of guilt, wants to protect her because he can't live with that. He does not
yeah,
ever want something like that to happen to her again, or any woman probably, because
sure.
it was so probably traumatic for him too. So then you put these two together, and it's kind of like, well, this is my lot in life,
Mhm.
and so now we're together, and they're both probably in their 40s, unhappy and divorced by now.
Sure,
Sorry.
sure. But I think also if it's when you get tested, and Arden fails the test again, I think he could be forgiven for what happened. He was a kid when this happened, Audrina. He was never able to stand up to all these other boys. But as an adult, he should be able to. By the time what happens to Audrina as an adult, when she falls down the stairs and she's like unconscious, he has this opportunity to show what a real man he is now and stand by her and everything. And what does he do? He ends up with Vera again. And, you could almost argue throughout the whole relationship, Vera was always inserting herself, and maybe he was flawed at 14 or 15, fooling around with Vera. And like we said, it appears that they got, he's the one that got her pregnant. So that's a big deal, in my opinion. And I think that that means like maybe he didn't really love Audrina because he wouldn't have done that, but I can maybe forgive it based on that age. But by the time they're adult, and at this point, Audrina has like, again, I think it's a trauma you have to get over the rest of your life, but somehow she manages to get past it and meets Arden mentally, physically, everything that he's wanted, she's given him now. So he has no excuse, in my opinion, whatsoever to
Agreed.
not be devoted to her. So the fact that once Audrina falls, he's basically with Vera again, plotting possibly Audrina's death, he is able to keep putting it off, but that's because he's really a coward and doesn't want to act. And really, it's Sylvia that ends up saving Audrina again. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, you're right. As he's older, he's still messing around with Vera. So
Hmm.
why are you putting Audrina through this? If you're not committed to her
Hmm.
and love her, let her go. Be her friend.
No,
If that's all you can give her, that's all you can give her. But she really gets the short end of the stick with Arden, I think.
yeah,
And just, I mean, Vera's already mean to Audrina. And then on top of that, with the Arden Vera stuff, It just makes it worse. I don't even know how she could even look at him.
Yeah, and I think that like as horrible as it all is, it's good that she got to find out because she was again willing to give herself to Arden. What's going to happen 5 or 6 years down the road if, say, she hadn't fallen down the stairs? There are going to be boring days. There's going to be days where like not everything's exciting. That's part of being with somebody forever. Is the good, the bad, everything. And Audrina's already proven she can get through anything, and he still betrays her. He still lets her down. He's still almost about like if Sylvia hadn't saved Audrina, she would have died because in Arden because he didn't do it. So no, I don't think. Yeah, I think that there were chances that he had, but do I think that he really loved her? No, I think that he could have saved her as an adult, and that's what I think we really have to judge that relationship by is those final scenes. And he is trying to like, manipulate Audrina into being like again. What I said earlier, nobody wants to be the bad guy. So he is sort of like, you knew who I was. I've always loved you blah blah blah. But again, she in the novel, and it's the hardest pill to swallow at the end of the novel, the fact that she goes back. But like she goes back for Sylvia, so I forgive it. Arden just happens to also still be there. But like for me, it's the hardest part is reading like when she or I love that I'm reading when she's like, I already gave him first chance, second chance. Am I really going to give him a third chance? No, I've got to go. I got to go. And I'm agreeing with her because I'm like, how many chances do you need? Like, fine, he failed as a child. He failed as a teen. He's now failing as an adult for no reason. No, I don't think that he did.
Yeah, and
Love her.
and I think that we all feel that when we read the book. Because even though, like, let's just use Flowers of the Attic, for example. We've got Kathy and Crease. We know it's ick, but we still want them to be together
Mhm.
when we're reading it.
Yeah.
You don't
Same.
want
I
that
want
when,
it.
yes,
Yeah.
but you don't want that when you're reading My Sweet Audrina. I never was like, oh, they're perfect. I want them to love
Hmm.
each other. This
Yeah.
is great. No, I'm like, he's terrible. Get the hell away from him.
Yeah.
You don't ever feel that when you're reading. At
Well,
least
I
do.
felt it through the first 2/3 of the book where I'm like, oh, I hope they end up together. I want them to end up together. But even the first time at 12 or 13 reading it, I was like, oh, he's terrible. Like, even
Yeah.
I could understand at that age, get out
Right.
of there. Now, again, I haven't read White Fern. I don't know if I ever will. I feel like it's like the Foxworth Secrets books with Corey coming back. I only feel like Virginia Andrews could write a sequel to My Sweet Audrina. No, if I love, we've already discussed it. We love a lot of what the Ghostwriter stuff, the Cutler, Landry series, but something like a sequel to My Sweet Audrina. So I don't know if you're gonna. I'm sure some of you are gonna have opinions about that or bring up that as like arguments and maybe, but I haven't read it. And I don't know if I ever will. But I do want to talk about the movie too.
But I do want to say, too, that we have had theory videos on when V.C. Andrews has stopped writing and the Ghostwriters taken over and the things we like and don't like. And I have to agree with you. My Sweet Audrina, this sequel could only
Be written
be
by
written by V.C. Andrews.
Virginia Andrews.
Virginia Andrews, yes. Like, I agree with you because
Yeah.
we already have problematic things from Heaven and
Right.
Garden of Shadows because of the Ghostwriter, and is this really what she wanted? So I agree with you. I
Yeah.
think that if there was going to be a sequel, it would absolutely have to
Right.
be
So
written.
maybe in White Fern they end up things work
Mhm.
out and everything's great and he proves his love. Hope so. Great. I don't know if I'll ever read it, but I do want to talk about the movie because I think that it's again the first time I watched the movie I had a real knee jerk reaction to it that I was like this was terrible. I can't believe this. But, I know I'm a collector of things, so I'm like, well, but I've got to buy the DVD. So later on, maybe a year or so later, I finally rewatched it on DVD, and I was like, oh, I actually really kind of like it. And a big part of it is because I do like that, like, the initial child in me that read these books when I was 12 or 13, wanting her to be with Arden, it's like, oh, because I really like the actor that played him. He was in Lion, the Next
Yeah.
Wardrobe was Peter. So I was like, oh, this great casting. And then he ends up being a hero in this, and it's great. And yes, I do think in the movie, it's a love story. He's meant to love her. He ends up like not being with Vera. But again, I just want to clarify, as much as I love getting to see that, it's not at all the book, and it's a big part of like I know a problem with it because the story of my sweet Audrina is very tragic. The whole idea is that she ends up being the true Audrina by her self-sacrifice, but that's going back and taking care of Sylvia. Again, Arden is looped in with that. But in the film, there's no Sylvia, so she has to if she's choosing to go back with Arden. So I do like the film, you know, appealing to the like fairy tale 13-year-old in me. Love getting to see it work out for them. but it is hard to watch because knowing the book that's not Arden, and no, I don't think in the book that he really did.
And this is something that we've talked about, is that V.C. Andrews books are the gift that keeps on giving. You, every time you read it, you get something different from it. I've read them like every decade of my life. So, like you said, when we were younger, we're like, oh, we want them to get together.
Yeah.
And then by now I'm reading it going, oh my gosh, run away from him.
Run.
Get. Like,
Yeah.
so that's, again, part of why I love these books so much and why we've been able to grow as friends, rereading these over and over through the years and having these discussions. And for once, we're on the same page.
Right, for sure. But to wrap it up, I think that no, I do think that there are moments of love. I do think that there's moments of caring, but I ultimately think it's in the book for Arden that it's obligation. And I think that I didn't really think about this until we were filming it, but as I was saying it, I'm like realizing that I can forgive him for giving her as a child. He was kind of helpless. As a teen, you're a teen, you make mistakes. Young people make mistakes. But when he was in his 20s and he had the chance, and she's now devoted herself to him and proven to be everything he wanted, there was no reason he couldn't. If he loved her, he would never have gone to Vera. And again, it's just his character. He's a weak man. But no, I don't think in the end that he really loved Audrina.
I absolutely agree with that. I mean, you can only get so many chances.
Mhm.
And even now, like with friendships we've had with other people or relationships or whatever, it's like at a certain point, it's like enough's enough.
Yeah.
And I think for Audrina, that third time should have been enough.
Yeah. And I think if Sylvia hadn't been there, she would have been able to leave. She may have struggled a little with her father. I know that he wanted her to stay too. But I do think that only because of Sylvia, and I don't think that, she really would love Arden anymore. But again, that's supposed to be the tragic story of what makes her the first and best Audrina is her selflessness so that she would go back. But no, to answer the initial question, I don't think so. But what do you all think? Are you Team Arden? Do you think that Arden really did love Audrina? What are your reasons for that? Or do you agree with us that it was just a sense of obligation and that he had his 1, 2, 3 chances and still didn't live up to it? But as always, glad we got to do a VC Andrews episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Let us know what you think in the comments below and give us a thumbs up, and please subscribe. Have a good one.
Thanks.
Bye.
John Amos